So I was talking to Andrew, the founder of Moto Insight, the other week. Super successful founder. He grew the company to like $20 million top line in ARR. He ended up selling it to Auto Trader. So things ended up going really well for him. It was a long journey, took 12 years. And the interesting piece, like what we really focused on was the pivot, because for the first 3 years, he worked on a marketplace that had some traction, but didn't really take off. And it was only when he shifted to more kind of SaaS, B2B enterprise software play that things really hit it. And that's where he kind of grew it to $20 million in revenue. This was 14 years ago. And so a lot of the kind of innovation in the car space hadn't happened back then. And so the idea made a lot of sense. It was a car marketplace for new cars specifically, between consumers on one side and dealers on the other. And the idea is that as a consumer, instead of having to go to like dealership to dealership to dealership to find the exact car with the exact specs that you were looking for, you could just build it online, and basically the dealers would ultimately, whoever had it, would kind of surface up. And so it would just remove a lot of friction from the buying experience. And then when Andrew starts talking about the pivot that he makes, one of the things he says is they started asking themselves questions, right? Like, is there a much bigger opportunity that we can capture? And what he says is something that many founders say when they pivot, which is the vision always stayed the same. It was about, how do I make the car buying experience better, more transparent, faster, more convenient? That was always the vision. But it's how we accomplish that vision that evolved. You can think of this as like a product market fit pyramid, right? At the bottom, you have vision, then value prop, then product, and then go to market. And the way to use this pyramid is that when you start tweaking things, right? Like when you go after and you have a certain vision, like in his case, making the car buying experience better, right? You have a certain value prop, which is, in his case, at least originally, to help people like find the right car, right? So maybe that's the value prop. The product was a marketplace that brought kind of dealer inventory online, and the go-to-market was a mix on the one side of like direct consumer marketing, and on the other side, more B2B type, not really sales, but partnerships. So that's what it originally was. When that, after a few years realizes that that's not really working, he starts to tweak things. And the way to think about it is you always kind of go from top to bottom, right? The first thing you want to change is just your go-to-market, because that's kind of the easiest thing to change. Okay, I'm selling maybe SMB. Now I'm going to go and try and shift to enterprise. I'm selling through cold calling. Maybe I'm going to do email campaigns, or I'm going to do it through trying to do like inbound marketing, whatever it is. In his case, specifically, when you think about Unhaggle, I'm going to go from selling to direct consumer plus the B2B partnerships to create this marketplace. And I'm going to go and sell direct to dealers. Dealers are now going to pay me. The product also had to change, but not that much. If you think about it, the product was already bringing dealers inventory online and having a way for users to build it. That really didn't change, except instead of being an open marketplace with many dealers, he took that product, went to the dealer and said, you're going to pay so that your inventory goes up on your website and people can just find your cars that much more easily, right? So this kind of Shopify experience, but just for your dealership. And then the dealers would pay him directly. So go-to-market definitely changed. Product only changed a little bit. Value prop really didn't change. Like at the end of the day, the value prop for the dealers is sell more cars. The value prop for the users is to find cars more easily. And the vision certainly didn't change, right? It was a world where the car buying experience is a lot more transparent, with less friction, and so on and so forth. And that's the way to think about it, like the kind of product market fit pyramid. As you go out, you one way or another, whether you thought about it explicitly or not, you have created this pyramid. You have a vision, you have a value prop, you have a product that's supposed to deliver on that value prop, and you have a go-to-market to take that product and value prop to market. And if things aren't really working, you want to work from top to bottom of that pyramid, changing things until, worst case scenario, your vision might just kind of be off, and then that's probably a full restart. But otherwise, that's the way I would think about, that's the construct I would use as you're kind of tweaking things, pivoting on your journey in terms of what you should, product is harder to tweak than go to market. And certainly value prop is harder to tweak. Like if you change a value prop, everything above that pyramid has to change. So that's really the kind of product market fit pyramid, right? Start at the top, work your way down. The other thing I want to touch on is, so now Andrew kind of goes through this pivot, and he starts working with dealers on this new enterprise sales kind of play. I asked him, how that played out. And what he said is he started working with some automakers that became their design partners. And then note the difference, right? So when Andrew actually starts making this pivot and he starts working directly with dealers and trying to get dealers to pay them, dealers go from literally kind of saying, yeah, this is a cool marketplace and not really using it, to the point that he's actually able to find some automakers that become his design partners, and they help him finance the development of the product, right? Like Andrew's bootstrapped, so he can't move unless he gets cash in from his customers. And it's not about quantity. Like he went to a bunch of different dealers. Not all of them jumped at this opportunity, right? Like always, you're going to have early adopters, late adopters. You're going to have that kind of adoption curve, and it's not going to suit everybody's needs right away. What you want isn't quantity of yes, it's intensity of yes. What you really need, and one of the big signs that you're onto something, is if you find a select group of small customers that are really intense about what you're building and really, really believe in it to the point that they're willing to invest time as a design partner and money to actually finance the creation of your product. That's how badly they think that your product is going to move the needle for them, that it's worth it for them to make that investment. That was probably sign number one that this new play was actually going to work and actually produce real value for his customers. And on that note, like the other thing this is the piece that's important. Why did he go out and find design partners? It wasn't actually so much because he knew that was the way to get to success. It was actually because he needed to. He didn't have outside funding, so he literally couldn't do anything without this. And that's one of the powers of bootstrapping, and especially these days, like when frankly a lot of founders are getting forced to bootstrap because the funding environment is pretty terrible. Think of it as an edge, because it is, in a way, it's an edge. Yes, it's more painful. No, you don't get to pay yourself a salary, maybe a salary at all, certainly not the same salary that you would if you were funded. You can't hire as much. Like there's just so many constraints, but in a way, constraints set you free because they force you to do the things that you really need to do. Had Andrew been funded, right? Had he raised like this $4 or $5 million seed round that was happening before, he didn't need to get these design partners. He could have built, and then he might have gone in a different direction because he might have had some other idea, put a team on it, built a product, gone out to market, only to realize that also didn't work. But because he had to get funding from his own customers, he ultimately was forced into a decision where if he wasn't going to provide the sort of value that led customers to effectively prepay and finance the development of his product, it wasn't a thing that he was going to build. And that's almost in B2B exactly what you want, because it forces you down the right path. It forces you down the path of, am I providing real value? And then therefore, am I getting closer to product market fit? Versus, I've got all this money, I've got all these resources. Let's just build stuff that we think could be cool, could provide value, but not force ourselves to be real. And I've seen this plenty of times, and especially the last few years, and even more so, frankly, with repeat founders, because they're the ones that were able to attract money on vision. Like there are people that are really good at selling a vision, at selling a dream, and therefore getting money like pre-product market fit, pre-idea, even like at idea stage, pre-product from investors. And there's upsides to that, obviously, but there are some serious downsides. And I've seen it so many times where because there's money, people get hired, things get built, things then get over polished. And yet, if you go back to that pyramid, something was seriously off. Either the value prop was off, the product, the go-to-market, something was seriously off. And it doesn't matter how much you build around that thing. If at the end of the day, you're not clearly moving the needle for your customer, the thing's not going to work. It doesn't matter how pretty it looks. When you bootstrap, you just can't go off the path so much because you have these constraints that force you to stay on path because you don't have money to go off path. When you've raised a bunch of money, it's actually way easier than you think to go on the wrong direction for many millions of dollars for many months with many people, only to realize, oh, that's not going to work. And the thing I asked Andrew, because one of the things I was really trying to get at is, how do you know when to pivot? It's so hard to know when to pivot. I wish it was a rule, but there just isn't. His answer is, there's definitely a vibe difference that you can feel. When it's working, you feel it. That entire 3 years, like when he was building the marketplace, every single step was a grind. It felt like we were fighting battles every day, left, right, and center, and the wins were just so micro. Whereas on the software side, so when he shifted to the enterprise play, the wins were way more tangible. We land a new logo, we land a huge check. Felt like just momentum that built on itself. This reminds me of when I was at GymTrack, we had at one point we pivoted to a new product. Long story short, I won't get into the why of it, but the idea for this new product was a sensor for that would go on gym equipment to help gym operators understand usage, right? So if you think about a big, let's say like Anytime Fitness, right? So like a large gym chain, they have equipment across many, many different gyms, and yeah, they're franchisees and these sort of things. But at the end of the day, every piece of equipment costs like $10,000 to $20,000. And if you were to ask some of these operators why they buy the piece of equipment they buy, they don't have a good answer. It's like, oh, I just thought we needed 15 treadmills. Why not 12? Why not 18? And all that optimization actually adds up to a serious amount of money. So having been in the gym industry for a bit, that was kind of the problem identified. We had these sensors that would go on the piece of equipment, would detect when things in use and non-use, and report that back to a dashboard the gym operators could look at and better optimize their equipment spend. Sounds like in theory, like it's a good idea. So what did we do? Well, frankly, we did the wrong thing because we went out and spoke with some, serious gym operators. But what did we do? We showed them the product. We're like, hey, here's the thing that we built. What do you think? And I'm telling you, out of 20 conversations, 20 of them said, oh my God, this is amazing. This is the future. This is exactly what we need. So, okay, we're super hyped up. Like, this is awesome, right? Like, finally, we've landed. Like, oh my God, I can't believe. And people were actually talking about it. Like, we would hear other people, and then we would talk to somebody, say, oh yeah, I heard about you from this other person, because they were talking about how cool your product was. Clearly, it was cool, right? It was clearly innovative for the time and for the space, which is, not that innovative, but that's a whole other thing. Anyways, the point is, then we go to sell it, and we're talking about something we're like trying to charge like a few $1,000s. Let's say it's like $5,000 a year for something that each treadmill is like $10,000 to $20,000. And then when we go to sell it, it's effectively crickets. Like we landed some sales, but it was so painful. Every single sell was so hard. And then when you think about the fact that this is $5,000 and a treadmill costs $20,000, something's clearly off. I remember one day, actually, we were in one of our alpha customers where, they have many clubs, like let's say 100 clubs. We were just in one doing kind of the first phase. It had taken us so much work just to get into that one location. And I'm talking to the purchasing officer, and they're telling me about the gym, and they're like, oh yeah, like actually, we're going to replace these. I just bought, I think it was like eight machines, like 2 leg presses, this and that and the other. I'm like, how much was that? He's like, 80,000. I'm like, this person just spent $80,000 on equipment on a normal day. Like, it's just like, that was just another buy. It's just 80K, cool, gone. And I had to fight for months to get $5,000 from them. Something's wrong. And clearly something was wrong. And this is the vibe part of it. Is like, I wish there was a rule, because there just isn't. Some sales are going to be hard, some sales are going to be easy, but you just kind of at some point start to see the signs like, wait a second, if they're spending tens of thousands of dollars on a whim on this other thing, and that same organization is making it so hard to spend a few $1,000s on my thing, clearly I'm not solving a top priority problem for them. And really I wasn't. If you look back, like if you think about gyms specifically, all they care about is, how do I open more locations? How do I keep more members? Like, those are the two things. And how do I get more members, right? Those are the things that they're thinking about all the time. And anything you can do to drive that, great. Anything else is noise. And that's what we found out, but we found out the hard way. Could we have found this out the easy way? Of course we could. Having done the right amount of research at the outset, instead of showing the product, we probably would have gotten these insights in the first place and realized that, equipment spend management just isn't that big of a deal. So Andrew had this idea because of a problem he had himself, right? Like, he bought a car. He was like, wow, this really sucks. What if there was a better way? And he actually did some research. He said to me, we spend a ton of time talking to customers. It's a no surprise. You pick 10 random people in a parking lot. You ask them, hey, do you like the car buying experience? 9 out of 10 will probably have some story about how they didn't like the experience. It's just one of those cliches. When we talk to car dealers, naturally, the first reaction is, hey, anything that helps me sell more cars is a good idea. On the surface, we thought we deeply understood the space. That's interesting right there, because, and this is so common, that's why I'm like picking on it. Talking to customers has become such a cliche that I really believe that just about any founder is doing it. Like, they're talking to customers. The question is not so much, are you talking to customers? The question is, what are you talking to them about? And so if you actually look at what Andrew did, you can spot the issue. First of all, when he goes, let's say, to consumers, what does he say? He says, do you like the car buying experience? That's a bit of a setup, right? I mean, obviously it's not that good of an experience. So a lot of people are going to say no. All you're getting though are kind of fake results, right? So what might you ask instead? Well, remember, what you're trying to discover are top of mind problems. So you might ask them like, hey, when's the last time you thought about buying a car? What have you done towards buying a car? Where do you go when you're looking to buy a car? Like, these kind of top line questions, top level questions that are trying to answer the question. When you get down to it and you say, did you like buying a car? And they're like, no. Okay. You've already kind of preset them for something. What you're trying to do is find out where they're at today. Because one of the problems, like, so back to the original question, why didn't this marketplace work? Even though customers hated the old buying experience, and even though this marketplace could have been, a more, less frictionful experience, like a better experience. Well, the reason is it's not a top of mind thing. People buy cars every like 5 to 7 years. And, even if they discover you have to get them at the right time. Even if you get them at the right time and they discover the marketplace today, they have no one to refer to because they don't know anybody that's also looking for a car at this point, because people only look for cars every 5 to 7 years. And when in 5 to 7 years they need a car again, they might have forgotten your marketplace. So that was a huge issue. On the flip side, when he's talking to dealers, it's a similar thing. Like, if you're like, hey, here's my idea, it's going to help you sell more cars. What do you think? Of course, dealers are going to tell you that, yeah, why not? Like, it's a great idea. Sure, it's going to help me sell more stuff. I love it. And by the way, that's the another problem, is that when you go out and you talk to customers, if what you're doing is telling them, like, here's what I'm thinking, here's my idea, what do you think? Just put yourself in their shoes, right? Like, are you going to tell somebody that you think their idea is bad? Probably not. What you want to do is please people. So in all likelihood, psychologically, you're going to tell them, oh yeah, that's a great idea. I mean, what's the harm to you? You have no skin in the game. So you might as well kind of be a nice person. And that's what you're going to get. And that doesn't help anybody. And so when you go to dealers, the questions have to be a lot higher level. Like, what is your day like? When you get in, what do you do? How do you sell cars? What channels matter? What channels don't? How many cars you sell? Like all of these much higher, like what websites do you use? Which ones work? Which ones don't? Just to actually understand the reality of a car dealer. And okay, how many cars do you move per month? How many cars would I need to help you move per month for it to be a meaningful thing to you? Like these are the kind of questions that are actually going to help you understand what the car dealer's situation is like, what their day-to-day is like, what they value, what they don't value. You can ask them, like, even what is the number one problem that you have on a daily basis? What are the most important problems that you face? And let them tell you what their problems are. Instead of saying to them, hey, is selling a car a problem? Like, is this a problem? Is this thing that I'm solving a problem to you? Most people are going to be biased and they're going to tell you, yeah, it is. Yeah, sure, it's a problem. But you're not finding out nearly enough. You're trying to figure out what is their number one or number two problem? What are they thinking about all the time? What could you solve that would have a huge impact for them, huge ROI? That's what you're after. And you get that by asking the right questions up front. So it's not just, are you talking to customers? Are you talking to them about the right things? Are you doing it the right way? The nuance is really the key that sets apart research, true research, and effectively fake research, which is, going to help you speed through discovery phase, check some boxes, and ultimately get closer to product market fit. On that same tangent, by the way, because we're on the topic of marketplaces, it's actually quite common, I would argue, that marketplaces that sound like they make sense actually don't work out at all. This one being a case in point, right? Like a marketplace for new cars sounded like it made sense 3 years later, just wasn't really spinning. And then you compare it to marketplaces that really did work, like let's say Uber or Airbnb or even eBay. And I think one of the key things that you have to think about if you're building a marketplace is you need to, and I'm sure there's exceptions to this, I can't think of any, but I'm sure there are exceptions to everything. But I think as a rule, you need to be critical to at least one side of the marketplace. So you take Uber, for example. If Uber stops working tomorrow, I'm okay. I mean, I'll take a taxi. It sucks, but whatever. But the Uber drivers are out of a job. Whether they're part-time workers or full-time workers, they're out of a job. That's critical. You think about Airbnb, and again, today Airbnb is morphed and there's a lot of other places that you can kind of rent your place. But when Airbnb started, and we're talking about zero product market fit, so that's what we care about. When Airbnb started, the only way for you to earn income off your property was through Airbnb. If Airbnb shut down, you lose your entire stream of income. Again, for a user, you would just maybe go to a hotel, go to a hostel, whatever. You have other options. But for the owner of that Airbnb was absolutely critical. eBay, same thing. When it came out, the only way for you to sell whatever you were selling was through eBay. It was absolutely critical for the sellers. And usually I would argue, at least these three examples, it's critical on the supply side. So if you're building out a marketplace, like take now Unhaggle, right, which was the first version of Moto Insight, the new car marketplace, was it critical to either side? Dealers? No, because dealers, they're still selling cars. Whether Unhaggle works or doesn't, they have other channels. They're already selling cars. Is it critical to the users? No, because they're already buying cars. And so that creates a lot more friction, makes it way harder for the marketplace to get off the ground. You've got to, I think one of the things you really need to think about is your marketplace critical to at least one of the two sides, even if it's a niche, initial segment, because the problem is it's chicken and egg, right? And so you need one of the two sides to feel like it's so critical that they need to be there, even though the other side is maybe not really there yet, right? Until things get off. Once a marketplace gets off the ground, it tends to take care of itself. But at the beginning, when you're going from 0 to 1, 0 to product market fit, if you're not critical to at least one of the two sides, it's going to be really hard to kind of balance the two sides of the marketplace, to keep them together for long enough to really kind of create the fire. If you listen to this episode and the show and you like it, I have a huge favor to ask for you. Well, it's actually a really small favor, but it has huge impact. But whichever app you're listening to this episode on, take it out, go to a Product Market Fit show and leave a review, please. It's going to help. It's not just going to help me, to be clear. It's going to help other founders discover the show, because the algorithms, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Apple, whether it's any other podcast player, one of the big things they look at is frequency of reviews. It's quantity of reviews. And the reality is, if all of you listening right now left reviews, we would have thousands of reviews. So please take literally a minute, even if you're just writing like, great podcast, or I love this podcast, whatever it is,
just write a few words. Obviously, the longer the better, the more detailed the better, but write anything, leave 5 stars, and you will be helping me, but most importantly, many other founders just like you discover the show. Thank you.